Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, Republican State Representative Jeannie Ives announces her candidacy for governor and addresses an audience of supporters on why she believes Governor Rauner has failed the state. She then discusses her agenda for Illinois should she be elected. Then in 15 minutes, Governor Rauner and members of the Illinois Department of Public Health hold a press conference to announce a new helpline to fight opioid abuse and help those suffering from opioid addiction. Following that in 50 minutes, State Treasurer Mike Frerich holds a press conference to denounce the GOP's congressional tax plan for assigning a Social Security number to a fetus, a move which he and representatives from Planned Parenthood and Personal PAC say will undermine a woman's right to choose. And finally, in 1 hour, Eddie Johnson, the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, gives an address at the City Club of Chicago on progress made toward improving the city's public safety. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Hi, I'm Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association. For over 80 years, we've represented the interests of those who work in the Illinois trucking industry. We work with members of the legislature to pass laws to help make the roads safer, to help keep Illinois trucking competitive, and to help provide ongoing educational opportunities for those in our industry. The technology of trucking is forever changing. So too are the laws regulating the trucking industry. That's why the Illinois Trucking Association is proud to support the work of the Illinois Channel, which keeps citizens around Illinois connected to what's happening in state government and what changes are being discussed that will impact their families, their communities, their future. And the Illinois Channel gives those of us in industry an opportunity to share our thoughts on public policy with our fellow citizens across Illinois. I'm Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association. I'm also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council on Transportation. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next, from Wheaton, Republican State Representative Jeannie Ives announces her candidacy for governor and addresses an audience of supporters on why she believes Governor Rauner has failed the state. She then discusses her agenda for Illinois should she be elected. This runs about 15 minutes.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. Many of you have been by my side since I first ran for Wheaton City Council in 2009. You have been among my most ardent supporters and important advisors on both politics and policy. From the Wheaton City Council to the Illinois House, I told you I would always tell you the truth. I would expose the scams. I would be the advocate for taxpayers. In short, I would live by the code that was instilled in me by my parents and then codified by West Point and my service in the U.S. Army. I will not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate those that do. It's a simple code, but it represents a revolution in Illinois state government. It also means you make enemies. You see, in Illinois state government right now, you choose to be popular with the Illinois political ruling class and become an enemy of the Illinois taxpayers, or you choose to represent tax-paying Illinois families and make enemies of the political ruling class. I choose tax-paying Illinois families. Governor Rauner chose the political ruling class. That's the difference. That's the choice in this election. When I was first elected to Illinois House, Republicans in both the House and the Senate were in the super minority, and liberal Democrat Pat Quinn was governor. Democrats could have passed any legislation and signed into law any bill, and we could not have stopped them. Perhaps they knew Bruce Rauner would come along to do their dirty work for them. You see, Chicago Democrats, led by Mike Madigan, never called for, much less signed into law, trans birth certificates. No, Bruce Rauner did that. Chicago Democrats, led by Mike Madigan, never called, much less signed into law, public funding of abortion on demand. No, Bruce Rauner did that. Chicago Democrats, led by Mike Madigan, never called, much less signed into law, making Illinois a so-called sanctuary state for persons here illegally at the expense of American citizens who reside here legally. Bruce Rauner did that. Bruce Rauner did not fight Mike Madigan. He signed into law Mike Madigan and the Chicago Democrats' holy grails of public policy. Rauner didn't turn us around. He sold us out to Mike Madigan and the Chicago Democrats. The positions taken by social justice warrior Bruce Rauner are so extreme that each one of them is opposed by a supermajority of likely general election voters, Republicans and Democrats alike. So disqualifying are Rauner's policy decisions that he's featured on the cover of the most recent issue of the iconic conservative magazine National Review under the headline, "Worst Republican Governor in America." And so he is. Bruce Rauner is the bad example. So if the Republican Party were to renominate Bruce Rauner for governor, we would be handing the governor's race to the Chicago Democrats. Bruce Rauner cannot win. The polling numbers command it. More importantly, Bruce Rauner should not win. Our self-respect as Republicans and commitment to conservative principles demand that he not win. Look, I supported and helped get Bruce Rauner elected in 2014. I believed his argument that his personal wealth would free him to do right by Illinois and lead the revolt against the political ruling class. I was wrong. The tough-talking dude on a Harley with no social agenda turned out to be an empty Carhartt jacket. We were promised a conservative reform governor. Instead, we got an Ivy League gender studies professor. Benedict Rauner betrayed us at every turn. Benedict Rauner betrayed Illinois conservative families who have been ridiculed culturally and hurt fiscally. Benedict Rauner betrayed law-abiding Illinois families who've been victimized by violent criminals who are in this country illegally, just as Chicagoan Brian McCann, who is still awaiting justice for the murder of his brother Dennis. Benedict Rauner promised to roll back Democrat tax hikes, cut spending, and crony double dealing. Instead, he abdicated when Republicans and Democrats joined to hike state income taxes back to Pat Quinn levels, signed legislation to bail out a public utility, and most recently proposed a budget with more spending than the one offered by Mike Madigan and the Chicago Democrats. Benedict Rauner didn't turn around Illinois. He turned on the Illinois families to whom he promised a conservative reform agenda. The result of Benedict Rauner's reign is Illinois families fleeing in record numbers. And it's not seniors retiring to the Sun Belt. It's millennials seeking job opportunities in Wisconsin and Indiana. Last year, a record 86,000 Illinoisans took $4.75 billion of income to live somewhere where Bruce Rauner is not the governor. Now, Governor Rauner hopes to win re-election by scamming Illinois Republicans one more time. Since Rauner has been exposed as a weak, unprincipled man, he hopes to convince Republicans to give him a pass by arguing that he's better than another weak, unprincipled man named Mike Madigan. Bruce Rauner wants people to look past who he is and elect him based on who he is not. I am asking voters to consider who I am and judge me on that basis. And that's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for governor of the state. I'm a three-term state representative, a West Point graduate, a former Army officer, a wife of a West Point graduate and a former Army officer, and the mother of 5 children. My son, the Army Ranger, and my son, the Navy pilot, could teach Rauner a few things about the difference between pretending to be a tough guy and actually being a tough guy. For that matter, my brother, sister-in-law, and their 3 daughters could teach Rauner a few things about facing each with fearlessness as they attend to the needs of my nephew Paul with developmental disabilities. And just to continue, my small business friends could teach Rauner about the personal sacrifice it takes to keep the lights on in Illinois. And law-abiding families on Chicago's South and West Side could show Governor Rauner what it means to truly fight for their homes and families against a political machine that is rigged against them. Look. I have a 5-year record as a state representative in Springfield. I want you to assess me on it. Rauner runs from his record. I run to my record. I have opposed tax increases while proposing spending reforms. I've opposed big government bailouts while advancing ideas that would make Illinois a more attractive place to do business. And I've stood up for our conservative values on important moral policy choices when others have hid or surrendered. My running mate, Rich Morthland from the Quad Cities, a farmer, college educator, locally elected official, and former state legislator, is cut from the same cloth. Together with our allies in the General Assembly, we are going to deliver on the policy revolution Rauner promised before he quit and threw in the towel with the Chicago Democrats. We're going to give Illinois families their home equity back by dramatically reducing property taxes and rethinking how we fund schools. That's right. We're going to make higher education at Illinois colleges and universities as affordable for middle-income families as our conference peers in our neighboring states. But we're also going to realign public sector salaries and benefits to be commensurate with their private sector counterparts who finance it all. And we're going to shrink the size, scope, and raw number of units of government in Illinois. We can't afford not to do this. We're going to force the Illinois politicians to lead by example by eliminating pensions and health care benefits for these part-time employees while indexing their salaries to the median household income in Illinois. It's time the ruling class politicians took a 30% pay cut and Illinois families got a bump from the government that is supposed to represent their interests. Since politics is about people, I have a message for families with forgotten people in Illinois. I'm speaking about persons with developmental and intellectual disabilities. Those families and the nonprofits who provide for them have been lied to over and over by both parties and by this governor. They won't be forgotten by me or Rich Morthland. We're going to take Illinois from one of the worst in the nation to the best in the nation in providing services for persons with disabilities who need them through no fault of their own, because that's what a civilized society does. And Chicago is no longer off limits to Republicans. There is no reason Chicago should lead the nation in black unemployment. Minority families, like all Illinois families, have been fleeced by the bipartisan combine corruption. The Ives-Morthland administration is committed to making the state of Illinois the #1 state in the nation when it comes to doing business with black, Latino, and minority business enterprises. We're going to connect. We're going to do this by connecting the successful with the aspirational and incubate the creative problem solvers with the innovative, marketable ideas. It's time to end Illinois government-centric status quo and return state and local governments to the limited, effective, family-centric social service providers they should be. We will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those that do. We will be a virtuous administration because we will be a courageous one. We will articulate who we are as conservative reform Republicans. We will take the fight to the failed, predatory, big government policies of the extreme left to every locale and neighborhood in the state of Illinois. The Ives and the Morthland families are in this fight to win it because we know what's right. We're asking your family to join us. Now, everyone wants to be a warrior until it's time to do what warriors do. Warriors are unrelenting. Warriors advance through pain, through ridicule, through fear, and through grief. They always advance. I've been afraid. I have been hurt. I have faced moments, both personally and professionally, when my principles seemed more like burdens than badges of honor. But I've stood my ground through ridicule and even threats of violence. I have fought through pain, through fear, and through grief. Today marks the 199th year of statehood, and we begin our bicentennial year. We are today's stewards of Illinois' future. We owe it to our ancestors and our grandchildren to right the wrongs and retake our place as a beacon of opportunity. We are ready for what lies ahead. We will put Illinois on a new path. That is our mission, and we will complete it. God bless Illinois.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.
Next, from Chicago, Governor Rauner and members of the Illinois Department of Public Health hold a press conference to announce a new helpline to fight opioid abuse and help those suffering from opioid addiction. This runs about 35 minutes.
Okay, great. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Illinois residents are suffering from a scourge. People across America are suffering from a scourge, and that is opioids, opioid abuse, opioid addiction. It is a tragedy. It is taking lives. It is destroying families. We've got to do everything we can to end this scourge and keep the people of Illinois safe. I want to thank Dr. Nirav Shah and his team at the Department of Public Health for the state. They have been working on this issue for more than a year, developing plans and taking actions. We formed an opioid task force to deal with this challenge, and that task force has laid out a very thoughtful, excellent plan, and they have been traveling the state, talking with community leaders, health leaders, law enforcement officers and others to implement the plan and get feedback on how we can coordinate, because this is a big team effort. We need the state working together with the federal government, working with local governments, local community leaders, local health professionals, and law enforcement to end this scourge. We had almost 2,000 Illinois residents die from opioid overdoses last year. This is terrible, unacceptable. We have got to end this. Our goal is to reduce that number by at least a third in the next couple of years, and my personal goal is to end it completely. We have got to end this tragedy that is impacting so many people across the state of Illinois. Today, we are announcing the creation of an opioid hotline, basically an opioid helpline. So anyone can call in to get advice, get referrals, get access to treatment, so that they have one place to go, anyone in the state of Illinois, one place to call to quickly get the advice and recommendations and referrals you need to be able to deal with this horrible challenge. We are also very proud. We've had a standing order, and it's having a big impact. Standing order making naloxone available to anyone in the state without having to go through complex process, complex prescriptions and treatment. So because naloxone can save lives, and we need ready access, and I'm very proud of our team for creating that. It's readily available now. With that, for more detail on our progress, I will turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti. She and Dr. Nirav Shah have co-chaired our opioid task force and are making great strides, and I want to thank them for that. Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. As the governor stated, we've been working very hard across our state this past year, meeting with agency heads to combat this epidemic. We have some directors behind us, but I would submit to all of you that there are a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders that are very concerned about this, and we've been talking with them continuously throughout the course of this past year. As you know, the governor recently signed an order, and that order provided for a task force. The minute we had this task force created to prevent opioid overdoses, we hit the ground running, and we started traveling the state, doing field hearings in numerous locations. When I talk about field hearings, is that we first talk to families that have been afflicted by this opioid epidemic. Then we talk to law enforcement to find out what law enforcement is doing all across the state. And each and every day we find out that depending on the resources available, they could only do certain things. And this is very important to us because as we implement our action plan, we need to know the needs all across our state. I think we could all agree that all 102 counties here in Illinois were not created equal, and we need to see how they're dealing with this epidemic. We've also been hearing from the medical field, and they've been telling us exactly what they need and the sort of guidelines they need so that they could function appropriately. So as a backdrop, thus far, we've been to standing room only locations during these field hearings in Chicago, Champaign, Mount Vernon, Decatur, Dixon, Woodstock, Waukegan, Addison, Crystal Lake, Rockford, Rock Island, and Peoria so far. In other words, this has not been taken lightly, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we're also going to be scheduling more meetings, more hearings as the time progresses, because a lot of communities are very eager to tell us what they're doing. Now, everywhere we go, we learn something different. But we also know that we have our goals in place because we do have this plan and we're going to stick by it. And the plan is to curb the spread of this crisis by treating and promoting recovery for those suffering from opioid use disorder and averting opioid overdose deaths by 1/3 over the course of 3 years. So we are now implementing the tasks in our action plan. And today, as you know, we're going to be hearing about how we're implementing a few of those tasks. In October, IDPH issued a standing order for naloxone. It's also known as Narcan, and I call it the resuscitator because those who are experiencing an overdose could finally find help, but quickly. With the standing order now, people do not need an order. I got Narcan trained right away because we are now becoming our first responders in our communities. Also, too, we've established the opioid prescribing guidelines for medical professionals. Now, why is this important? Because our medical professionals want these guidelines. We want to make sure that the people that are getting opioids are using it appropriately and they're not getting a huge amount of opioids when they only need it for a mere few days. We really need to track that. And with these guidelines, we'll be able to do that. Finally, today, we launched the 24/7 helpline to assist those in crisis who are seeking immediate help. This is incredibly important because as I've traveled the state during these field hearings, a lot of people say there's still a stigma attached to this. And some people are simply too embarrassed to go seek help. And so how easy could it be to have this helpline to avoid that stigma and get on that plan to recovery? So our task force is extremely busy, will remain extremely busy because our families and the people in Illinois are so worth it. We're going to combat this epidemic because as you folks know, this epidemic knows no neighborhood, no color, no class. My friends, it is an equal opportunity aggressor, and we will beat it. So with us today, we also have James Demas. Director, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. No one starts misusing opioids because they want to become addicted. No one wants to put their lives or their family's lives at risk. No one chooses to have this disease. Even though we understand that addiction is a disease, as a society, we are still learning to treat it as a disease. Let me be frank. Stigma prevents us from treating addiction like the disease it is. It's estimated that nearly 250,000 Illinois residents are in need of some type of substance use disorder treatment, but are not receiving it. And stigma is a big reason why. Fear and shame of coming forward and seeking help is a very real and has very negative impact on people's chances for recovery. While stigma is an enormous barrier to people that need treatment, it's not the only barrier. Too often, people want help but don't know how to find it. Try doing an internet search of addiction or substance use treatment sometime. You get thousands of responses, and sifting through that information to find the kind of treatment that seems like it would fit you and might be available in your community can be overwhelming and confusing. To help Illinois residents find effective evidence-based treatment services, the Illinois Department of Human Services has been able to secure federal grant dollars from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to design and implement the Illinois Helpline for opioids and other substances. I'd like to recognize Doug O'Brien, who's here from our DHHS regional office, as well as Jeff Cody, who is here on behalf of SAMHSA from the regional office. We hope this helpline will improve access to treatment services, as well as to the medications that, when combined with counseling services, have proven to be effective in helping people on the path to long-term recovery. This is a resource that's going to be available to people statewide to help them with their substance use issues, including opioids and others as well. Thank you. I'd like to now turn it over to Dr. Nirav Shah, the Director of the Department of Public Health.
Thank you very much, Secretary Demas. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nirav Shah, and I'm the Director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today, particularly our partners and stakeholders that we work with every day on this crisis, as well as our federal colleagues and other state and local colleagues who are joining us here today as we launch the Illinois Helpline for Opioids and Other Substances. The administration began addressing the opioid crisis shortly after taking office, nearly 3 years ago now. And in that time, we have seen the number of overdose deaths increase exponentially. Since 2013, the number of heroin deaths in Illinois has more than doubled, and the number of just general opioid overdoses, deaths related to opioid overdoses, have more than quadrupled. Last year alone, nearly 2,000 individuals in Illinois died of a heroin or opioid-related death. For context, that is more than 1.5 times the number of all homicides that occurred across the state, and almost twice the number of fatal motor vehicle accidents that occurred across the entire state. Now, those numbers belie the actual true impact of the opioid crisis, not just on individuals, but on families and on communities. At least one survey estimates that 1 in 3 individuals across the state is somehow affected by the opioid crisis. 1 in 3. Think about that. Take a look to your left, take a look to your right. One of the 3 of you, in some way, either directly or indirectly through a family member or a friend, is thought to be impacted by the opioid crisis in some way. Now, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, as we've traveled around the state, we've heard firsthand how this crisis has affected individuals and communities. But at the same time, we've also heard inspiring stories of courage and compassion and resilience. And one theme shines through all of those stories: that recovery is possible. That recovery is indeed possible. But recovery requires 2 things. It requires hope, and it requires help. It requires hope, this belief that things will get better. Things can get better. With hard work, with dedication and perseverance, that there is a better vision of the world for individuals who are affected. But it also requires help. Overcoming a demon as difficult as substance use disorder is rarely something that can be done by oneself. And it's not a journey that anyone has to make alone. Help is available at every step along the way, including, perhaps most importantly, at the first step. That's why the helpline that we are unveiling today is so critical. Through 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access to the helpline and its wraparound services, individuals grappling with substance use disorders, or their friends, or their families, can call and receive counseling. They can be connected to resources and to ultimately start on their path to recovery. Now, we specifically structured our statewide opioid action plan around 3 pillars: prevention, treatment, and response. Today's helpline addresses all 3 squarely. It helps prevent individuals from becoming addicted in the first place. It helps connect those who are grappling with substance use disorder with treatment, and it helps in the immediate response so that individuals who are in jeopardy know where to go. Really is the classic situation where one intervention can address individuals grappling with this disease at all stages. I look forward to continuing the productive collaboration of more than 10 state agencies as we implement further the action plan and work toward our goal of reducing opioid deaths by 1/3 over the next 3 years. I'd like to thank the Governor as well as the Lieutenant Governor for their dedication and support of this initiative, and I'd like to thank each of you for being here today. Thank you very much. I'd like to now turn the podium over to Mr. Luke Tomsha. Luke?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luke Tomsha. I have an 8-year-old son, and I'm the second of 5 children from a working-class family in central Illinois. After my graduation from the University of Illinois in engineering in 2000, I became an active member of my community, working high-profile jobs, including as school tech director and an IT consultant to local businesses. I volunteered at the March of Dimes and moonlighted at my family's popular restaurant. What many didn't know was that I was addicted to heroin and prescription opiates. For over 14 years, I would make 3-hour round trips to inner-city Chicago in the middle of the night to get my medicine so I could avoid withdrawals and make it through the following workday. It was a rat race, and I became a slave to these drugs, too ashamed to seek the help that I desperately needed. It wasn't until my close friend and coworker Ryan Bukaki overdosed and died while I was in rehab 800 miles away that I decided to finally come forward with my story and face the stigma and shame that both myself and my family faced. Since then, I've been on a mission as one of the many voices and families of the children affected by the crisis. This past year, I started a nonprofit, the Perfectly Flawed Foundation, aimed at strengthening communities affected by substance abuse. Fortunately, my community has united behind these efforts, and this past month we raised over $102,000 at our first fundraiser. Our core goal is to provide the children affected by the crisis with exposure to extracurricular activities such as art, music, karate, yoga, and gymnastics. We hope to unlock their talents and guide them to a life that gives them purpose so they don't seek happiness in drugs and alcohol. I hope we can inspire others to do it, others in their community to step up as well. Individuals need access to help, and this hotline is just a start to the many solutions that are needed. And I'm glad the state of Illinois is taking action. In the United States, over 140 families are losing loved ones each day due to the crisis, and the number of babies born addicted to opiates is soaring. In 2015 in the U.S., over 80,000 children went into foster care due to parental substance abuse. With all due respect, it is a cold, hard fact that young adults, including my 8-year-old son, have better odds surviving war in a foreign country than they do growing up around the dangers of the opioid crisis in their own backyards. This problem isn't going away on its own, and our children's lives are at risk. Please don't take this problem lightly. We must all step up to make a difference before our communities are destroyed from the inside. My continued condolences for the families who continue to lose loved ones. I'm in this fight for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Questions on this issue?
Governor, I noticed in the plan that there's not much of an effort to fight the large drug companies. For example, there's a growing national awareness that, for example, Purdue, the makers of OxyContin, are in large part to blame for aggressive salesmanship and pushing these drugs into the heart of America. In fact, some states' attorneys general have joined in class action lawsuits to try to combat this. Is this something you'd like to consider as part of your plan?
A number of jurisdictions are engaged in lawsuits on this issue. I think it's a good step. Our administration has focused on prescriptions and prescription-making guidelines and trying to encourage changes in the way these substances are prescribed. And maybe, Dr. Shaw, you might comment on that a little bit.
Thank you, Governor. One of the things that we know that is an entry point for individuals who find themselves grappling with a heroin disorder is a legal and valid prescription they receive from a physician. Although prescribing rates overall have come down just a bit in the last few years, they are still multifold higher than what they were even 10 or 15 years ago. One of our primary aims is to reduce the overall volume of prescribing, in a sense to close the front door into the pathway that many folks find themselves grappling with addiction with.
Without enforcement of any kind, how would you actually make that happen?
Well, there is the enforcement in this situation redounds to the physicians themselves. Indeed, the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation recently released guidelines that should inform how physicians prescribe opioids and in what settings opioids are applicable and for what duration. And coming as those do from the Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, they do have the impact of regulating physician behavior.
Dr. Shaw, what evidence do you have that it is having an effect upon the profession itself? I mean, the doctors sometimes have a hard time turning down their patients and telling them, no, you shouldn't have that medicine you're asking.
You're right, sir. The dynamic that occurs in a physician's office between the patient and the doctor is a difficult one. And what we don't want to do is micromanage or overregulate that relationship to such a degree that individuals who really truly do need pain management find themselves on the short end of the stick. That's certainly not our goal. What evidence do we have? Well, we know what the CDC recommends. The CDC itself released prescribing guidelines of this nature a while back, and what we've seen in other states that have implemented similar guidelines is a gradual but definite reduction in the overall volume of opioid prescribing.
Governor, your administration received about a half a year ago a $16 million grant from the federal government to focus on this. Has anybody studied actually what has happened in the last half year with that $16 million to see if you did provide more wraparound services and to see what the effect is, so that you would know whether to scale that up or scale it down?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Hi, my name is Maria Bruni, and I'm the Acting Assistant Secretary for the Department of Human Services over Programs, and I'm the Acting Director of the Division of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. I am the administrator who works on the Opioid STR grant, the one that you're referring to, which came out of the 21st Century Cures Act. We are administering that money. We're working very closely with SAMHSA on collecting, not only administering the programs that are funded out of the STR grant, but also collecting the data that's required from SAMHSA to be able to demonstrate that the multiple initiatives that are funded out of those grant dollars, what kind of impact they're having in terms of getting people into care. One of the big priorities is us working with hospitals to be able to have a warm handoff between people who are experiencing an opioid overdose in the emergency department, to be able to get them connected into care, so that we don't have people recycling in and out of our emergency departments having multiple overdoses. We are working with our county jails to be able to start medication-assisted treatment prior to release from county jail, so that, because we know that people upon release from correctional settings are at very high risk for overdose. So we probably have about 10 or 15 different initiatives that are funded out of the award. And we're working with SAMHSA on the data collection so that we can demonstrate through the first year of the award the impact that those services and programs are having.
Do you have any results of measuring this yet, any metrics? And if not, do you have a targeted date by which you would have that? And two, how much of the grant is left? And three, are you looking to the state or federal government to continue this program?
Yeah, there were lots of questions in there, so I'm going to try to remember all of them. I don't do this a lot. In terms of the last question, yes, we have received at least some initial information from SAMHSA that the second year of the award should be fully funded. So we're looking right now towards looking through what portion of the first year of the resources have already been spent and what remaining dollars we have for the first year, and then trying not to carry too much money over, but then also planning for how we're going to implement the second year of the award. When we applied for these grant dollars, we did have to do a 2-year budget, so we had to explain what all the programs and initiatives would be funding with the full 2 years of the award, because that was the intent from SAMHSA and HHS at the time. So we've been just going through and working on that. In terms of the we received the award we got the notice of award in February. We applied in February, but got the notice of award in May. So we are in the first 6 months of getting everything started.
Do you have any numbers as to how many citizens in Illinois have actually been reached by this program in the first 6 months?
Well, I know that one of the programs that we fund is helping local county health departments and local substance use treatment providers and other organizations be able to do the training to be able to administer naloxone and to be able to train first responders and actually to purchase naloxone for those first responders to use. I know that in the first 6 months of this grant, we've trained over 1,000 sites across the state of Illinois to be able to deliver naloxone to individuals, and I believe we've had over somewhere between like 8,000 and 10,000 individuals trained just in the first 6 months of the award.
Governor, there are a lot of addictions coming from long-time chronic illnesses, people being prescribed for chronic illnesses. Would you be interested in expanding the medical marijuana program for the state as an option for that?
That is a topic that's being discussed within the administration and with the various constituents as well as the legislature, and we'll see where those conversations.
This discussion about opioid overdose, and is it part of that overall discussion of other ways to treat that?
I'll ask Dr. Shah or others to comment on that.
There are some interesting and preliminary data with respect to the use of medical cannabis as a substitute for opioids. As of right now, we are reviewing those data to determine what potential policy avenues could follow from them. It's also important to note that in addition to cannabis as a potential option, we now know from a study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association just 3 weeks ago that in an emergency room setting, good old Tylenol and Advil do just as well as opioids do. So we have to think about FDA-approved avenues as well as those involving medical cannabis, and we're contemplating all of those.
Can we get a little more information on this hotline? So has there never been a hotline until now, and is it up and working? And who are the people that will be answering the calls? And how then, perhaps, I get it that we're here today, but like people that might call 911, how are they going to get directed to this?
That's great.
Does anybody have any info on that? There's never been a drug hotline like this before?
There's never been a single number, so we've a lot of the numbers refer folks to the state of Illinois, to the Department of Human Services, to the Division of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. We get probably anywhere from 40 to 100 calls a day, and those are we were only able to take those calls between business hours of 8:30 and 5 p.m. So we know that there's been an enormous need. Especially we've seen just the dramatic increase in phone calls that we get to our state Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. Some treatment providers will have a 24-hour line. Most of those are, most of those have you have to leave a message though if you're calling after a certain hour. So we really wanted, when we were working with the opioid STR dollars that we received from SAMHSA, to be able to make a resource available for all Illinois citizens that would be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My name is listed on the SAMHSA locator for their website. I get probably 10 to 15 emails over every weekend for people who are desperate to find help, and so it's really it's great for us to be able to refer folks to the line. And no one said the number yet, but it's 1-833-2-FIND-HELP. So we're hoping that everyone will walk away remembering that number. It's 1-833-2-FIND-HELP. The people who are answering the calls are trained call takers who the company that's doing it set up the same sort of helpline in the state of Massachusetts, and the call takers are trained in an evidence-based practice called motivational interviewing. So they start with where the caller is starting from. There's not a script. They will treat every caller as a unique person with a unique set of strengths and weaknesses and problems, and they will respond to everyone individually. This is not a scripted format that the call takers follow. And again, this is the first time we've had a full statewide helpline.
And is it up and running?
Yes, it is up and running. We've been testing it out over the weekend. So starting on Friday, we started forwarding all the calls that were coming into our DHS DASA office, and we've had some really great feedback so far over the weekend, but we're hoping after today that there will be a flood of calls. Our call takers are all trained and ready, and there is a bank of them who are all ready to take the calls from everywhere in Illinois.
Are there even enough slots at substance abuse treatment centers to treat everybody that has an issue? They were decimated, it seems, from what the people that I talked to over the budget have passed. Is that back up and running, or are we going to have people calling a hotline and nowhere for them to
I'm not going to say that access to care isn't an issue, and I'm not going to say that it's not an issue, especially in certain areas of the state where there may be fewer providers. I will say, though, that sometimes people's perception about what they need can be not exactly what they think. So sometimes when we think about treatment, we think about residential inpatient stays, and there are lots of outpatient programs that are treating people effectively, and there's lots of medication-assisted treatment providers. There are physicians that are prescribing buprenorphine and other medications that have been found to be effective in treating substance use disorder, and coupling them with referrals to outpatient counseling services. One of the parts of this helpline is that the call takers are trained in the addiction, the Association Association for Substance Use Medication, to be able to place people in the right level of care, so that people they'll do an initial screening and an initial assessment that'll really try to match them with the right services they need. So rather than just people trying to call different numbers and try to find out which is the right setting for them. So yeah, there are issues with access to care, but we're also knowing that this will help place people a little bit easier and in the right setting for them. My name is Maria, and the last name is Bruni, B-R-U-N-I. Yeah, yeah, the regular.
I don't know, either governor or director, what is being done about this access to care issue? Do you plan to do money? I believe money for cuts. Governor, I believe that was part of your cuts for this year's budget. There were cuts as well too.
Yeah, I can take that a little bit, only because we work on this quite every day. We have also been working very closely with SAMHSA and with HHS. There are numerous opportunities for federal resources that we're bringing to the state. In this last fiscal year, my division, and I know that there's resources that IDPH has brought to the state too, but my division, the Division of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse, has brought in over $40 million of federal funding for specifically targeted the opioid crisis. With those dollars, we're able to really look to see where we have gaps in services. We've done a mapping of where all the treatment availability is throughout the state, and we're now entering into really trying to improve access to care in in areas of the state where, especially for medication-assisted treatment, where there's a lack of some of those resources. So all of this is being done in a very, we're trying to be very thoughtful with these dollars, but we're knowing that we're using them to supplement some of the gaps in services that we've seen, not just recently, but throughout history in the state, where we've had some service deserts for a long, long time.
Luke, I know it's difficult for you to speak, but I think you had a very powerful message. Could you tell us about whether or not you think this hotline will be helpful to others facing the same kind of issues that you face?
I think that this is a tool that can be used. You've seen for the last several years grassroots groups built by mothers and families who have lost their children, raising awareness of this issue, and there hasn't been much action taken. And I view this as a tool, that people can use, but it's just a tool of the many that are needed. So, I think it's a good start, and I just hope that the state and the federal level take this issue seriously. So I'm just glad to see something being done.
Can you spell your last name, please?
My last name is Tomsha, T-O-M-S-H-A.
Say how your addiction started 14 years ago.
Yeah, I didn't find satisfaction in my career, and there was nothing in my career that I really enjoyed. I was in IT, I was good at it, but I didn't enjoy it. So after work, I would get wasted with friends, getting drunk. It led to harder things. It led to opiates, and from there, it became a vicious cycle. So when I finally got out, 14 years later, I decided to give up everything and not pursue a career in IT and find something that gave me purpose, where I would get more happiness and satisfaction in my career, so I wouldn't turn to drugs and alcohol for my happiness.
Was it expensive to support that habit? How did you do that all those years?
It was extremely expensive.
How were you able to finance that?
I worked 3 jobs. I spent nearly $5,000 a month at its peak, and It's nothing I'm proud of. But as you move forward in your addiction, your tolerance gets bigger and bigger, and you will feed it at any cost. And you see that with people's homes getting broken into. You see people taking drastic measures just to feed this addiction, behavior that you would never expect out of certain individuals, including myself. I would have never thought in a million years I'd be standing up here, but I am. So, okay.
Thank you. Are there other questions on this issue? Again, thank you. Thank you for your focus on this critically important. Again, I'd like to highlight for everyone with the cameras and everyone, 1-833-2-FIND-HELP. Call in 1-833-2-FIND-HELP. Also, ending opioid misuse, go to #EOM, #EOM. We want to communicate and share and get help on a prompt basis, and that's what this is about.
Hi, I'm Dave Tretter, President of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities. For years, Illinois was known around the world for the quality of its colleges and universities, and not just our public universities, but the many private schools that do such a great job educating more students annually than the publics. Schools like Bradley University in Peoria, Millikan University in Decatur, Loyola University in Chicago, and Northwestern University in Evanston. These are just a few examples of the schools that not only educate the next generation, but also serve as economic engines for their communities, with tens of millions of dollars in payroll and the purchasing of millions of dollars in local services. In fact, the combined economic impact of Illinois' private colleges and universities is over $20 billion annually. Collectively, these schools account for $3.5 billion in state tax revenues annually. Illinois' independent colleges and universities are a key pillar of the economy, bring in billions of dollars to the Illinois economy, as well as adding a cultural richness to our communities. That's why it's important that the state programs like the Monetary Award Program, which enables low-income Illinois residents to attend college in our great state, remain funded. And it's also why it's important for all of us to understand the economic impact of our colleges and universities have on the Illinois economy and our communities. This is why I'm also happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council on Higher Education. Their statewide, in-depth coverage of the issues that impact our economy, our government, and our cultural resources help to inform us all on the issues that matter. I'm Dave Tretter, President of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities, and proud to be a member of the Illinois Channel Advisory Council.
Next, from Springfield, State Treasurer Mike Frerich holds a press conference to denounce the GOP's congressional tax plan for assigning a Social Security number to a fetus, a move which he and representatives from Planned Parenthood and Personal PAC say will undermine a woman's right to choose. This runs about 10 minutes.
In the past several weeks, we have heard many things about the congressional tax plan. What we have not heard is how anti-choice foes are using it to push their agenda to eliminate a woman's right to choose. And that is why we stand here before you today, to make sure that everyone knows that the Republican tax plan, an effort that Governor Rauner has endorsed, is ladled with language to assign a Social Security number to a fetus. Let me say that again. Republicans are using tax reform to slip in language to grant a fetus a Social Security number. The answer to why is simple. Anti-choice forces for years have wanted to convey personhood upon a fetus in a misguided attempt to reopen Roe v. Wade. At a time when our country is divided, a time in which our country has never been more skeptical and suspicious of its political leaders, Republicans are using tax reform like some parlor trick to secretly attack a woman's right to choose. Now, I am watching this tax reform carefully because the plans thus far will hurt the vast majority of Illinois citizens, no matter what your definition of middle class. As treasurer, my eyes specifically were drawn to the proposed changes to the 529 college savings provisions. The 529 return refers to the part of the federal tax code that lets certain college savings efforts grow tax-free. In Illinois, 529 accounts are managed by my office. Bright Start and Bright Directions. They're some of the most highly regarded plans in the country. To open a 529 college savings account, one must have a Social Security number. What typically happens is an account is opened by an adult using the adult's Social Security number. When the appropriate time comes, the adult transfers that account to a child using that child's Social Security number. The Social Security number is the key because IRS rules mandate that a 529 college savings accounts be tied to a Social Security number. If the language is not struck from the House bill and 529 accounts are allowed for a fetus, then current IRS rules mandate that a fetus be assigned a Social Security number. Some might ask, how can we be sure that this is a secretive attempt to pursue a hyper-conservative agenda that has been rejected by most citizens in our country? Because the language addresses a problem that simply does not exist. I think the tax reform bill is bad because it hurts regular people. The tax cuts for regular people are temporary. The tax cuts for big businesses and millionaires are permanent. Homeowners would lose the ability to write off their tax payments. Big businesses would not. Teachers would lose the ability to deduct expenses to make classrooms an inviting place to learn, while big businesses would get a corporate write-off for a corporate jet. These examples are bad enough. And as the country focuses on these pocketbook issues, Republicans insert language into an obscure portion of the bill that could become the building blocks for a lawsuit to gut Roe v. Wade. And they want to return women's health care to the 1960s. We cannot allow this to happen. Today, I call upon Governor Rauner to use his influence with the Illinois Republican Congressional delegation to strip this offensive language from the bill. Today, I call upon Congressman Peter Roskam, who is on the House Tax Writing Committee, to keep the women's health debate from the muddy waters of so-called tax reform. Congressman Randy Hultgren, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, and the entire Republican delegation must separate a woman's right to choose from this tax discussion. Women's health care cannot be treated like some throw-in tax deduction. Standing with me today are Terry Cosgrove of Personal PAC and Paula Thornton-Greer of Planned Parenthood. And I'd like to invite both of them to come up and make some remarks as well. Paula?
Thank you. Treasurer, thank you for bringing us together today. Look, the American people have spoken when it comes to GOP's attacks on health care, but Congress refuses to listen. GOP leaders are so hell-bent on undermining the health care of millions, they're sneaking it into a tax bill. A tax on health coverage have no place in any legislation, especially not in a tax bill. Additionally, as the treasurer mentioned, the House bill includes language that explicitly allows unborn children to be account beneficiaries on 529 college saving plans, defining unborn children in the statute. The only purpose for this language can be to advance a relentless agenda to undermine access to safe, legal abortion by furthering notions of personhood through tax codes and other legislative vehicles. In fact, the benefit for pregnant and even non-pregnant people already exists. They are simply changing the language of a benefit to build a foundation towards their goal of banning abortion. Undermining access to safe legal abortion is wildly out of touch with the majority of Americans. Extremist politicians are putting women's lives at risk. And why? To score political points through these dangerous measures that the majority of Americans strongly oppose. Support for Roe v. Wade is at the highest it's ever been, with 7 out of 10 Americans saying they believe a woman should have the right to a safe, legal abortion. Let me say that again, that they should have the right to a safe, legal abortion. And that is more popular than Congress, the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party. This legislation is going to hurt women and their families, and we are not having it. This language must be stricken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Terry Cosgrove, and thank you, Treasurer Frerich, for bringing this to the public's attention. This language in the tax bill is nothing more than an attack on the right to privacy of those seeking legal abortion, but also calls into question the legality of birth control. This language says that a person can be defined at any point in pregnancy, which means that many forms of birth control, including the IUD and most forms of the pill, would be outlawed, which are used by 90% of American women. This tax bill is a direct attack on Roe v. Wade by right-wing extremists who are fully committed to making abortion and most forms of birth control illegal in the United States. And it's important that the voting public in Illinois understand what's taking place under the guise of so-called tax reform. The rank hypocrisy of these right-wingers who claim from the mountaintops that they want to keep government out of our lives, but yet want to insert government in the most personal and private decisions that a person can make is nothing more than outrageous. This bill is part of a national right-wing campaign to overturn Roe v. Wade and end access to the most commonly used forms of birth control. With the vacancies that are looming in the federal courts, there's been an unprecedented number of federal court appointments that have been made under President Trump, and as we know, the future of Supreme Court justices remains in question. It is imperative that reproductive choices in Illinois and across the United States are protected going forward, because the future for access to reproductive health care is very dim unless voters take notice of what is going on and act accordingly. Thank you very much.
Right. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you all very much for joining us here today.
Next, from Chicago, Eddie Johnson, the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, gives an address at the City Club of Chicago on progress made toward improving the city's public safety. This runs about 50 minutes.
Thank you, Jay. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here to listen to an important presentation by the superintendent. While gun violence may not affect your particular neighborhood or community, if it impacts anybody in the city of Chicago, it's a Chicago problem. And I want to thank you all for being here to hear from the superintendent about his strategy. I also want to call out and thank Frank also for being here as head of Chicago Public Schools, because in the end of the day, it's not an accident that in the superintendent giving his presentation about public safety, you actually don't see pictures of police officers. You see pictures of kids, which is a testament to the superintendent and what he understands as the mission of the city of Chicago when it comes to public safety, that it's very, very important that if our kids are making it to school, they're thinking of their studies, not their safety. And I think the pictures up here are a testament to who Eddie Johnson is, the values his parents taught him, and what he takes as his mission as the superintendent of the police department. This is an individual who grew up in Chicago's housing projects to make it to the most prominent position in the Chicago Police Department. He's Chicago proud, and we're proud of Eddie Johnson. Eddie, I want to thank you for being here. I'm not done with yet. I saw you moving that seat there, Eddie. Second is, you're going to hear a lot from the superintendent. Today's remarks are significant on a couple of accounts. First and foremost, Eddie and I were down in the 7th District in Englewood earlier this week, showing people from out of town who had heard about what is happening at the Situation Room, the Strategic Room, with the shot spotter. Right now, Englewood in the 7th District has the lowest amount of shootings in recorded history for Englewood. October alone, the 7th District was down 70%. That's not just off of 2016. They're actually farther down below 2015 and are actually leading the city in that effort. And the measure which is reflected of also this picture. And the commander, Johnson, in the set, we only hire people that are named Johnson at the end of the day, okay? You want a promotion in the police department, change your name. But at the end of the day, the commander said something I had never heard, which I think is significant. The superintendent will talk to you about the technology, go through the data. Overall in the city, we're down 20% this year. Different districts doing far better. What was the biggest measure of success? Not a piece of data statistically. 500 kids showed up on Halloween at the 7th district to trick-or-treat at the haunted house because they feel comfortable with what's happening with the police department and specifically in that district. And as a gentleman said, a longtime resident to Commander Johnson of the 7th district, I don't know what you all are doing, but keep doing what you're doing. And that, in the end of the day, that building of bonds between the police department and the kids who felt comfortable enough and their parents comfortable enough, as in the district office of the 7th district, that they would come there for Halloween, 500 long, with a long line of kids dressed up in their Halloween outfits. That, in the end of the day, was the measure. The superintendent and I can go over all the data and talk to you each district, where they are, what's happening. In the end of the day, that barrier, that wall, that psychological wall, have been taken down. And the results not only are successful work by the men and women of the police department, not just statistically, the progress, not success, the progress being made, but the real measure was that they felt that that district, the 7th district on 63rd, was theirs. And there was a bond of a trust and comfort that the commander and the rank and file that make up that district felt. And when you put that together, there is no technology, although the superintendent will talk about it, there is no technology as strong as that level of trust, cooperation, and commitment that came forward by both the children, but more importantly by their parents, who felt that close enough and that camaraderie with the police department. In the end of the day, the city of Chicago's efforts are about putting more police on the street and getting kids, guns, and gangs off the street, which is why it's so significant in the budget that we're taking up next week. We will have a record investment in after-school programs, summer jobs, safe passage routes, and mentoring for our young men and women. It is significant that we're adding nearly 1,000 new officers, but what is also significant is we're up to 115,000 kids in after-school programs, 31,000 kids that are going to be in a summer job program, and 84,000 kids on a safe passage route. Kids that can smile because they have a future and they know that the city cares about them. And I also want to compliment, and I've said this before at our graduations, but I'm going to say it here. We all know that the superintendent took over the helm of the police department at a very critical time for the city of Chicago. We are on the road to reform, and we're never going to get off. We are going to make sure our officers are the best professionally trained and proactive, upholding exactly what their training has set out to do for them. So while we could talk about what happened also in Englewood, we also saw what's gone on in the paper, and there is zero tolerance for any officer not upholding the highest standards we have set for him and her. I want to commend the superintendent for taking over at a critical time in the Chicago Police Department. We have a vested interest in their success. He has not only led them through that change and continue to stay on that change and been clear that there's no getting off that road to reform, but also doing it in a way that builds the bonds of trust with the residents that they are assigned to help serve and protect. And the results of that are the results of what I told you about the 7th district, about what the one lifelong resident said, what the family said when they showed up at the 7th district, what some of the other data and the investments we're making, but also being clear to the men and women who actually give of themselves to the city, that we expect the most of you and will invest the most in you, and that is, there is going to be zero tolerance for ever deviating from that. I cannot say enough. If I've given more time, I would say more things about the superintendent. who has to wake up on a regular basis to my phone call before he's up. So try to treat him nicely because I'm on him all the time in the morning. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Eddie Johnson, the superintendent.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the mayor for that really rousing introduction. Before I get started on where we are, I just want to take a moment to thank many of you all in this room for the well wishes and support that you gave my son and I through the kidney surgery process. I cannot tell you all what that meant to me and him. You know, we just were not expecting the city of Chicago to prop us up the way that you all did. And Webster still doesn't have a word to properly articulate my gratitude for that, so I'll just simply say thank you. Thank you. So I want to thank the mayor again for that introduction and sharing with you all the roadmap of our city's comprehensive strategy for public safety. It's an all hands-on-deck effort, and the mayor has been our biggest supporter, to be quite honest. And I'd like to thank the City Club for inviting me back to speak about the progress we've made in public safety since the last time I was here last year. For nearly 2 years, CPD has redoubled efforts to rebuild fractured public trust and address gun violence at the hands of repeat gun offenders, which reached unacceptable levels in the year of 2016. And that's why when I became superintendent last year, I challenged my leadership team to take a hard look at everything that we were doing with the goals of, one, building integrity with the communities that we serve, providing greater resources to our officers, expanding training and support for in-service members, and ultimately make Chicago safer for everyone. The collective response to that challenge served as the basis for our revitalized and reimagined crime strategy for 2017. Side by side with our crime strategy is a significant list of planned and in-progress reforms in the areas of personnel, use of force, training, transparency, and, last but not least, community policing efforts. That's one of the things that I believe to be among the most significant pieces of our plan is bringing district-level smart policing to officers directly on the beat in a series of district strategic decision support centers. And in those centers, we combine civilian crime analysts with predictive crime software, gunshot detection systems, and high-definition cameras. The information that the analysts and intelligence officers develop is then delivered without delay to the officers in the field on mobile phones that we provide to them. These state-of-the-art tools allow officers and civilian analysts to work smarter and faster, monitor gang conflicts in real time, and make changes to our strategy as the situations dictate. This mix of people and technology is quite literally at the crossroads of human intuition and the predictive power of data. In rolling out this new approach, we focused on 6 police districts on the south and west sides, traditionally where gun violence has presented the greatest challenges, not just in 2016, but over decades. Inglewood, Harrison, Deering, Austin, Gresham, and North Lawndale. The early signs of progress in these districts are incredibly promising. Inglewood was the first community where we deployed the support centers and has been fully operational since February of this year. Today, I never thought I'd say this in my police career that spans almost 30 years now. This still amazes me. Inglewood is leading the city of Chicago in violence reduction this year. Inglewood. And I just really cannot say enough about the leadership over there and the officers that work in that district that helped get us there. As I speak to you today, Inglewood has seen a 45% reduction in shootings and a 43% reduction in homicides compared with 2016. and shootings are down nearly 24% from the year 2015, which we considered not a bad year. In raw numbers, think about this for a moment. In raw numbers, that's nearly 150 fewer people who were shot in just that one community compared to last year, and that's a huge win. In fact, Inglewood is now at its lowest level of gun violence that we've seen since the turn of this century. Let me repeat that. Inglewood, right now, is at the lowest level of gun violence that we've seen there since the turn of this century. That's incredible. Across all 6 police districts where we've rolled out this new technology, shootings are down 25% compared with last year, outpacing the reductions that we're seeing citywide, which stands at about 20%. In raw numbers, citywide, nearly 650 people less have been shot in Chicago this year, with 18 out of 22 police districts seeing reductions in violence. So that's 650 families that haven't been traumatized this year because of gun violence. A recent analysis by the University of Chicago Crime Lab has pointed out that right now, we can say with certainty that our smart policing strategy has directly contributed to the violence reductions we've seen in those 6 districts. Now, this is not a cause for celebration, but it's actually a call for further action and continued investment in those communities. In the mayor's proposed budget for next year, he's promised the resources that CPD needs to roll out 6 more strategic decision support centers, and I'm grateful for his support in that strategy. And that's why I'm happy to announce here today that Grand Crossing and South Chicago districts will be the next 2 districts to come online with this technology by the end of January 2018. Later next year, we'll continue the expansion to Wentworth, Calumet, Chicago Lawn, and Grand Central districts. It's our mission to ensure that safety is not reserved for one community or one area in the city, but instead it's a right that every Chicagoan deserves and will get. New technology combined with the human intelligence is an important component of realizing that mission. So we're creating a culture of accountability in our neighborhoods when the repeat gun offender bill that Mayor Emanuel and I fought for in Springfield, the Safe Neighborhoods Reform Act, that goes into effect this coming January. We'll also continue to fight in Springfield to stymie the flow of thousands of illegal firearms that come into our city by holding gun dealers accountable also. But technology and legislation will only take us so far. We also need the human component to bridge all the efforts together. At the beginning of 2017, we embarked on a large-scale 2-year investment in personnel to add nearly 1,000 officers to the department above any existing vacancies. This additional personnel, which is being deployed throughout the city, will provide neighborhoods with the officers and detectives that they need to build greater community partnerships, reduce crime, and solve more cases. Our strategy also provides that the appropriate levels of supervision so that officers can be properly mentored and provided the guidance that they need to be successful partners with the communities that they serve. As we move into the 2nd year of our plan, as they have in 2017, nearly 100 new recruits will enter the training academy each month until the end of the year 2018. These new officers and supervisors will be guided by our revised use of force policy, which went into effect this past October. To ensure that we put a policy in place that's unique to Chicago, we asked for the first time in police department's history, we asked input from both the public that we serve and for the police officers that we expect to carry out this mission. The end result is a policy that is centered around the sanctity of life and de-escalation. Quite simply, we guide our officers on the principle that all life is sacred and that we'll attempt to de-escalate any situation wherever possible before the use of force is warranted. It also calls for officers to immediately render aid that is consistent with their training once a scene is safe. In instances where they may witness prohibited force being used, the officers must verbally intervene and report any misconduct that they witness. All sworn members of the department have received an initial 4-hour classroom-based course on the policy, and beginning in 2018, they'll also receive additional scenario-based instruction covering the topics of force mitigation and mental health awareness. Beyond preparing officers for policing under this new policy, it also marked the launch of a landmark 4-year training initiative. Starting next year, CPD will require all department members to take a set number of continuing education hours on a yearly basis, with 16 mandatory hours in 2018, and by the year 2021, 40 hours annually. This training will cover a mixture of mandatory and elective topics, from cultural competency and human rights to medical rescue and traffic stops, with a use of force refresher as an annual requirement. And I gotta tell you, as now a 30-year veteran, that really excites me, because I tell you all, the last time I got regular training like that was the year 1988 when I entered the training academy. So that's how significant this training module will be moving forward. This will literally change the face of policing in Chicago, ensure that officers continue to refresh or reset their skill set as officers, and they will now receive up-to-date annual training on the latest trends and best practices in law enforcement. It's a win for the community, a win for the department, and a win for our officers that patrol the streets every day. We've also been working to provide every officer on regular patrol with body-worn cameras and a taser. By the end of this year, every beat officer responding to a service call will be equipped with a body-worn camera, and that is a full year of the projected schedule that we had last year. By the end of 2018, every beat officer will also be equipped with their own taser. The tasers will give officers a less lethal option when the use of force is necessary. The body-worn cameras will allow us to see exactly what occurs during those interactions with the public. This level of transparency has never been seen before, but it'll go a long way in protecting the rights of those we serve, as well as protecting the rights of the officers. It'll let us see what we're doing right, and it'll also let us see where we need to improve. For me, what really ties all of these investments together is making community policing a philosophy throughout the department, where every Chicago police officer is a community policing officer. It began with the formation of the Community Policing Advisory Panel, chaired by Chief of Patrol Fred Waller, and made up of national experts, community residents, and Chicago Police Department staff. And it's similar to how we approached our use of force policy. The panel held a number of meetings to receive feedback from our officers and the public, and reviewed more than 2,200 surveys to develop a set of recommendations for a community policing strategy that's unique and specific to the city of Chicago. Among what I consider to be the most important recommendations are: number one, moving the community policing office under the direction of the Office of Superintendent, which we've already acted upon with the recent appointment of Deputy Chief Dwayne Betts. And let me tell you why that's so significant. Before, the community policing office was under the Bureau of Patrol, and the message that sent to the officers was that the Bureau of Patrol were the only ones responsible for community policing. Now, all police officers in CPD know it's a philosophy for the department. Also, a strong focus on engagement with the city's youth and a more robust community-oriented training for department members. And lastly, and effective problem solving with the community and other city agencies, among other things. After reviewing the final report, I decided to accept and adopt those recommendations that were laid out, because I firmly believe that we need to make significant investments to build the integrity within the communities that we serve. As part of that commitment, we will create a team of dedicated people to ensure that reforms are implemented properly the first time and are sustainable in the long term to truly change the way CPD does business. This is why the mayor and I requested funding in our 2018 budget for a new Office of Reform Management. In fact, the budget requests $27 million dedicated solely to police reform next year. So, Alderman Bill, thank you also. This reform management team, a first of its kind for the Chicago Police Department, will be part of my office and will continue to be guided by our next steps for reform framework that we released this past March, as well as action items from Mayor Emanuel's Police Accountability Task Force, also the U.S. Department of Justice report, and the upcoming consent decree with the Illinois Attorney General. The challenges that we're working to overcome were not created overnight, and they won't be solved overnight. But I firmly believe, that we're making significant progress to achieve the goals we all share as Chicagoans when it comes to public safety. At the end of the day, that means a police department that just not the police superintendent or the mayor can be proud of, but a police department that the entire city can be proud of, and a police department that's working with the citizens of this great city to make Chicago safer. Thank you, and now I look forward to any questions that you might have.
I have heard that one negative impact on crime was the consent decree that requires officers to fill out forms every time they stop someone. Is that true? Can technology help speed up filling out the paperwork?
Okay, well, it is a fact that we changed the way we document our contact with the public, but the consent decree really has nothing to do with that. We haven't negotiated that yet. What that was an agreement with the ACLU that we would document our contact with citizens differently. And what the difference was, before we would fill out a contact card about this size to document our interaction with the public. That card morphed into a 2-page form set that was more cumbersome, obviously, and it took up more time to fill out. So our documented stops decreased significantly, but it's difficult for me to really compare the contact cards with this new form because they're just two different things. It's like comparing apples to oranges. But what I will tell you, although we saw documented stops reduce significantly, what we also saw was the fact that our overall gun arrests went up drastically. So what that told me was that the officers were lasering in on the right people and stopping them for the right reasons at the right time. So I'm still encouraged by that particular aspect, but that ISR report is what we call it, investigatory stop report. We're still talking to the ACLU to see if we can get that one trimmed down a bit.
Okay, this is from our Board of Governors. Father Ryan, have you considered inviting President Trump to Chicago for a night ride-along without the Secret Service? With you in the Chicago PD to see the real news that you spoke about and not the president's fake news. It's a city club.
That is a great question. Okay. No, I have not considered that. But if the president would like to come here and actually see what's going on, you know, because I will say this. I'm becoming very recognizable around the country now when I travel to different events involving law enforcement. And when I get off the plane and walk through airports, people say to me, wow, how do you all survive up there? And that really chips me because it's a false narrative that the entire city is on fire. That's just not true. You know, we have pockets in the city where we have violence challenges. So I wish that people would come here to actually see what we've done. As I said earlier, we have almost 700 less people shot in this city this year. And that's huge. It really is. It's not success, but it's progress. So I think that we have to do a better job of just pushing that narrative out there that we are seeing progress and gains in this city in terms of violence reduction. But I'll invite anyone that wants to come here and see what Chicago is doing. I'll invite anyone to come and take a look at it.
Okay, the next question, Superintendent, is from City Club member Wendy Cohn. Will domestic violence training be included in the new curriculum?
You know what? Domestic violence training has been included since I was a recruit back in 1988. So that's something that we focus on because that's a huge part of some of the violence that we see in the city. So domestic violence training never left CPD, and we will continue to make that better and adopt the best practices across the country in terms of domestic violence training.
Okay. This is from Kent Kamen, I believe. I may have Kay Kamen, I'm sorry, with Sutton Place Financial, Inc. Specifically, what was done to bring down crime rate in Englewood?
So I think it's a combination of things. The technology, those strategic decision support centers that we went in there, that we put in the 7th District, helps a lot because what that does is it gives the commander the ability to look at data and let that play a part in how he makes his decisions regarding deployment. But technology that's a tool. The real meat of it is the personnel that's over there that are making gains with having the community trust us. I tell you this, I've been a cop now for roughly 30 years, and I've been all over the city chasing criminals, gangbangers, you name it, I've done it. And I never thought I would see the day in Englewood where you would have 500 kids trying to get into their Halloween haunted house because the people over there just didn't trust the police like that. That is really what tells me we're moving in the right direction because now not just those kids, it's easy for a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old to trust the police. It's more difficult for the adults to trust the police. And the fact that those adults brought those 500 kids to that district to interact with the police, that's huge. So all of that stuff, when you put it in the mixing bowl, all of it matters.
Okay, thank you. This is from City Club member Dr. Bill Truesdale, and it's a question about the Citizen Academy. He thought it was very helpful in understanding the structure and process of CPD. Can the program be renewed?
Yeah, we still have it. It's conducted, I believe now the classes are once every week, but it's a robust training, and I encourage all of you all to see what it is, because here's the thing. I don't think that people really recognize how difficult it is for police officers to do this job. This job is not easy. If you think it is, try doing it, because it's not. When you think about this, a police officer has to make a split-second decision on whether or not to use force or to use it. That's difficult. It's easy when you can sit back for 2 or 3 hours and pore over a video. That cop is making that decision in a split second. That's not easy. And one of the things that we encourage you all to do is go through that training, and we have a scenario called shoot, don't shoot. Go through that and see how many people you kill. Because I guarantee you will kill a lot of people. You will. But that gives you a sense of what police officers go through on a daily basis. And being a cop that has been involved in shootings, I know firsthand how quickly it happens, like that. I've only been involved in one incident where it turned into a firefight. But the other incidents, a split second, you have to make that decision. So the Citizens Academy is still ongoing, but I encourage you all to check out that shoot, don't shoot scenario and see how you come out. And let me know.
And if anybody was interested in that, how would they contact?
So you'd either contact Deputy Chief Dwayne Betts is now the Deputy Chief with Community Policing, and he will be a good resource for you all to reach out to. He's at headquarters. He's easy to find if you go on our website and contact him, or you can contact Deputy Chief Keith Calloway at the Training Academy to set up a seat in that class.
Great. This isn't your wife, is it? No. Okay. The Johnson name. It's all over the place. Anyhow, this is a question from City Club member Mrs. George Jane Johnson. That's why I asked the superintendent. This is one of those loaded questions from his spouse. Lieutenant Kim Toy was the daughter of my mentor when I first started teaching in the Chicago Public Schools. The bottom line of her question is, who was your mentor when you started, And why did you decide to become a police officer?
You know, so the reason I decided to become a police officer way back when I was a teenager, my mom had a really good friend. And so quite naturally, we became good friends with this lady's children. And when I was about 16 years old, one of her daughters went to a party and was abducted, raped, and killed. And that really made me start thinking, what could I do to help change some things? And that was the impetus for me looking into becoming a Chicago police officer. And the second thing, and as far as a mentor, man, there are a lot of people that I was blessed with having a lot of good supervisors during my career to kind of guide me. But I think the ones that really come to mind most are probably Terry Hillard, who was a former superintendent, and Gene Williams, who retired as Chief of Support Services. But, you know, like I said, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of good leadership that I could look up to and learn how to become the police.
Okay. This is from Rebecca Levin, who I think is with the Lurie Children's Hospital, strengthening Chicago's youth. The gains due to data-driven police strategies over the last year are impressive, but CPD doesn't do it alone. Can you describe the role of community organizations in reducing violence and how the department collaborates with these community organizations?
I tell you, that's a great question, because you're right on point with that wherever you are. You're right, CPD can't do this alone. Those programs like BAM, Becoming a Man, things of that nature are huge in helping us reduce this violence. Because I've shared this with you all. I went to speak to about 40 young men a couple of months ago. Actually, it was before my surgery. And all of these out of these 40 individuals, black, Hispanic, and a few whites were in that group. All 40 of them had committed violent crimes, from shooting someone to armed robberies to carjacking. And we were in a group setting, and we talked about what brought them around. So at the end of it, I didn't want any of those individuals to be corrupted by the answer that his buddy gave me. So I pulled each one of all 40. I pulled them aside individually and asked them, what got you out of that lifestyle? And I have to tell you all this. Every one of them told me the same thing, that somebody reached out to them and said, I care about you and I care about your life. So that gave them a sense that someone actually cared. And I'm not talking about parents. These were individual people that they didn't know. But that one thing meant a lot to these individuals. And you know, the mayor kind of touched on this earlier. For me as police superintendent, I know CPD can't do it alone. The benefits that we get from after-school programs and mentoring programs is enormous, because a lot of these kids involved in that lifestyle, all they're looking for is a way out of it. They are. Now, don't get me wrong. We got a small subsection of guys that just enjoy that life, you know, and okay, we got something for them too. But the ones that we do. But the ones that want to get out of it, we have really gotten good and efficient at taking external partners with us and knocking on. We are able to identify those individuals better now, and we'll go knock on their doors and offer them a way out of it. And I am happy to say, when we first started that program, they really, you know, I know, well, I won't say what they would tell us, but now, for every 5 in the beginning, 0 would really take us up on that. But we just kept at it. And now it's about 3 out of every 5 take us up on that offer to get them out of that lifestyle. So that tells me that a lot of them, if we just give them a pathway out, they'll get out.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. This is from Sabrina Gruntoli with Greeley and Hanson. Could you comment on how important support from the business community and organizations like the Chicago Police Foundation and others is in helping to advance current CPD initiatives?
Oh, that support is huge to us. You know, The mayor and the city council has been very receptive in the things that I've asked for since becoming superintendent. But, you know, let's face it, we still have budget restraints that we just can't fill. So the support from our corporate partners, the Police Foundation with John Roebuck and the Police Memorial Foundation has been huge because that allows us to fill in the gaps in terms of funding. These strategic decision support centers, they cost about $1.5 million roughly to stand up. That's not chump change. You know, if it was that easy, every city in this country have come in, you know, most of the major cities are coming in to look at what we're doing. If they were cheap, everybody would have them, but they're not. So, you know, the mayor and the city council has been gracious enough to give us a lot of money to get these things going. But the philanthropy in Chicago and the business community has stepped up to the plate, I have to say. And as a matter of fact, let's give them a round of applause. Because they have really stepped up to the plate to fill in the financial gaps that we need. And the reduction in violence that we're seeing this year really is fully supported, and a lot of that credit goes to our corporate industry and our business community in helping us fund these projects. So thank you again.
Thank you. And thank you, Foundation and Memorial Foundation and that. This is a question from a Chicago Police Department widow. How does the, in your opinion, how does the city justify stripping Chicago Police Department widows and retirees of health insurance benefits, leading to widow homelessness in some cases?
You know, that's a great question, and I have to be honest and tell you, I wasn't aware of that. But now that you've brought that to my attention, I will absolutely look into that. So please, wherever you are, reach out to me in the next day or so we can have some further conversation. But because I'll tell you this, as a police officer, not only as a police officer, but as a police officer that's been involved in shootings and having been injured myself, I know how traumatic that is and the financial burden that's placed on families of police officers that go through that. And the one thing that Superintendent Klein did when he was superintendent, and now all of us coming after him, it's my commitment, my pledge to you all that we will never forget you, because we know the sacrifices that you make by your family members coming on this department and sometimes giving their life for the citizens of this city. So it's an embarrassment to me that question even has to be raised, because that's not right. It's not right. And I pledge to you, I will look into that to see what we can do to stop that from happening. There's no reason a police officer's widow should be homeless after that person gave their life to serve the citizens of this city.
Two last questions. This is from Kimball Layden, Dr. Layden. You've talked about programs after school for the youth in your communities and that. Has the police department ever looked at developing similar programs for adults who are on probation and parole as a way of reducing criminal incidents and that? I know it's a very broad question and not really in your district.
No, you know what? When I spoke a few moments ago about us knocking on doors, that's what that's all about. So now what we do as police, we identify people who are at risk to either be victims of gun violence or the perpetrators of gun violence, and we go to them prior to an event occurring, and we offer them outside resources. So we take external partners with us now to get them in programs to put them back on the right path so that they can be productive members of the society. So yeah, we do have an initiative that's been going on for a few years now to address just that very question.
And the very last question before we have our drawing in that, there have been a number of carjackings lately that have attracted all of our attentions. We turn on the news or read in the print news, it seems like it's an everyday occurrence. And I noticed that you commented very forcefully on it the other day. Could you share with us some of your thoughts on that? And I think someone said these are mostly juveniles, An interesting question would be, should the court system and others look at these juveniles who do adult crimes differently than the traditional juvenile profile?
Okay, that's a great question. Is that somebody from the media that asked that question?
I'm not saying.
No, that's a great question. So we've seen a rise in carjackings across the city. And one thing I will share with you all, there's a false narrative out there that gang members are dummies, and that's just not the case. Some of them could be CEOs of Fortune 500 companies if they chose to focus their energy in that direction. So there's a narrative out there by gang members that if they commit these carjackings, the Chicago Police Department won't go after them. Well, they are sadly mistaken. They missed a target on that. And I tell you, it infuriates me that we've seen this, but it's because, and I'll give you an example of it. So a couple days ago, you all may have heard about this on the news. We had a carjacking on the west side, and the police gave chase, right? These guys, with the help of the FBI and our helicopter in the air, we were able to track these guys and ultimately chase them down, right? When they got when the officers pulled them out of the car, one of them looked at the police and said, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be chasing us." "Yeah, okay. I tell you what, you do it in this city, we're coming to get you." It's just incredible to me that now they think that they have a leg up on this police department because we won't come after you. Yeah, we will. We will. We're going to get you. Trust me. You keep doing it, we're going to catch you, and we're going to come at you with everything that we have. But in terms of juveniles, we have seen a spike in juvenile offenders. And again, that's because the way the judicial system is set up, the gang members, the older ones, the adults, recruit these young guys to do it because they know the consequence in the juvenile justice system is different from the adult justice system. So this is what I would say to that. I understand that a juvenile's mind isn't fully developed, and they can be influenced by these older guys. But at the end of the day, there has to be a consequence for committing those types of crimes, because if we don't, that's sending the message that you can continue to do it and you'll get a slap on the wrist. Now, I don't know where the sweet spot is for that, but I can tell you all this. We're working with our judicial partners in the state's attorney's office to figure out the right balance. But I know this as a young man growing up. If guys don't have a consequence that they fear more than the thrill they get out of doing it, they'll keep doing it. So it's incumbent upon us to really let them know that this type of behavior won't be tolerated, at least not in the city of Chicago. So again, I say to them, keep doing it because we will eventually get you. We will.
Thank you. Folks, let's give the superintendent a big hand.
Thank you.
Your son's not here by any chance.
No, this is first day in my time. Get out of here, man.
I just asked Superintendent Johnson if his son was here because we wanted to recognize him.
We should also make sure that everything gets credit for the repeat gun offenders. He started here as a city club in East.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay. It just so happens that Superintendent Johnson's son started at the Chicago Police Training Academy today, and we wish him well. And my president, Jay Doherty, just said to me, don't forget to mention that the legislation that the superintendent, Mayor Emanuel, Senator Kwame Raoul worked on that was passed this season in Springfield regarding guns and that started here at the City Club. So we are very impressed with that and very pleased.
Let me make a comment about that real quick. He's absolutely right. That conversation started here. And I remember you all asking me, what could you do to help us push that bill forward? And I said to you then, call Springfield. Many of you all did, and that made a difference, because I had a couple of them say, would you tell them to stop calling me? No, I won't. Not until we get it done. So thank you all. Thank you, City Club, for helping us with that.
Okay, don't leave.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Education has never been more challenging in Illinois than it is right now, with comprehensive education reform recently passed by lawmakers and our state's financing of education remaining under pressure. That's why the Illinois Principals Association acts to represent the needs of students and our members. We keep our principals up to date on changes in the law affecting education policy, and we advocate to keep our schools safe and to maintain a healthy environment conducive to learning. With all the changes happening in every field and with the ongoing financial problems facing Illinois, it's vital we all know about changes affecting our lives. That's why the Illinois Principals Association is proud to be a part of the Illinois Channel's Advisory on Education. Their coverage, whether that of key lawmakers discussing changes in education, an interview with the Illinois Budget Director on the state's finances, or the one-on-one interviews with those working in education, all help to keep citizens across the state connected to the real issues that impact the education of our children. I'm Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. I'm also proud to say I serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.